Good evening, one and all. Uh, Dr. T.S. Ravishankar had his MA degree in Sanskrit, MA in Ancient History and Archaeology, and he has done his PhD thesis in Sanskrit for the thesis entitled History of Vedic Rituals and Practices, a study based on inscriptions from the University of Mysore. Having joined the epigraphy branch of Archaeological Survey of India as an epigraphical assistant, he has served for more than 35 years in different positions and gradually has risen to the present position of head of the branch. He retired as the director of epigraphy. He is the chairman of Epigraphical Society of India, executive member of Place Names Society of India, and vice president of South Indian Numismatic Society. Dr. T.S. Ravishankar has established his expertise in deciphering Sanskrit inscriptions and also early coins. Presently, apart from editing of annual reports on Indian epigraphy, he has done the departmental publications. He has worked as an expert numismatist from Archaeological Survey of India at Delhi Customs Office to examine the coins. From last more than 25 years, he has been teaching the students of postgraduate diploma in archaeology at the Institute of Archaeology, Archaeological Survey of India, New Delhi. He has coordinated and conducted many workshops on paleography, epigraphy, and numismatics in Delhi and Mysore. He has also participated in many important archaeological excavations at different places, an important one being that at Ayodhya, and also participated in many seminars or conferences of national and international levels, and has contributed number of scholarly articles in English and Kannada languages to many reputed journals. Recently, he visited Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, for study of Nagari inscriptions available in that country under the Cultural Exchange Program of Government of India. Recently, he delivered lectures at Indira Gandhi National Open University, IGNOU, and at IIT Kharagpur on epigraphy. He was the General President for Epigraphical Society of India held at Dharwad 2016. He has prepared lessons for epigraphy for Karnataka State Open University for MA Ancient History and Archaeology. He has conducted refresher courses on epigraphy at IGNCA New Delhi in 2017. He has delivered lectures and prepared text on script and languages for EPG Pathshala HRD Ministry Initiative. We all are obliged to have such a great personality today with us to guide us in our journey of epigraphy and paleography. Introducing him is like introduction of the ocean done by a single drop of water. But protocols are to be followed, and hence I gave this very brief introduction of Sir. Now I request him to enlighten us with his precious words on the topic Introduction to Epigraphy and Paleography with special reference to epigraphical publications.
Thank you, Kritika. So, good evening, all the participants of this webinar. I should personally congratulate our young friends, Mr. Vedang and Mr. Tanmay, and other team members of the Kriyas for hosting this webinar, Introduction to Epigraphy and Paleography, Level 1, on the online course, and also giving me an opportunity to interact with you all. And already I think you are halfway through your online course, and I'm very happy to give a bit of my personal touch, my personal experience in the epigraphy branch, especially introducing epigraphy, and also there will be a special reference to publications. It was my experience when asked a couple of students to write a dissertation. They were not in the know-how how to approach the subject and what are the books they have to refer. And so I thought there is a great need to introduce to the students, to the aspirants of epigraphy and paleography. We have vast number of publications. Of course, they were done much, much earlier. There is a great need to add more and more publication and revise some of them which are already written. But we have a large, vast number of epigraphical literature publications and also on calligraphy. But I feel there is a greater need to come out with more publications with regard to calligraphy. Even now, more than a century old, Bharatiya Prachina Lipimala, written by Oja, is a monumental work. Even to this day, we refer, or for that matter, C. Shivaramurthy's book on calligraphy, or Indian epigraphy in South Indian scripts, and Dani. So I'm going to take out, after some time, the publications, and we have to view things in the all India perspective. That's my interest, because most of the agencies, they are focusing, for example, REACH in Chennai, they are focusing on Tamil Brahmi and its derivatives and all. And in many other places, they are more focused on the regional scripts and the languages. But this, an organization which has taken up the study of epigraphy and calligraphy on an all India basis, is really a great move, and it should continue. And students should be introduced to this at different level as and when it goes ahead with this program. And to understand, for a serious student of Indian epigraphy and calligraphy, there is a greater need to understand the antiquity of writing India, even before India, about the world civilization. And we cannot afford to leave David Deringer, who has authored two books, one, The Alphabet, and other, a truncated, a smaller version of the same book, Writing. He feels there is a neglect in the humanitarian studies, especially the scripts. For example, even to understand the Indus script, you should try to understand the whole scenario, what it existed in the entire world. So we cannot, in isolation, study Indus script for that matter. So a knowledge of the script that prevailed all over the world also is very, very essential. So for the students of calligraphy, I personally feel they should refer to the book written by David Deringer. After some time, I would be sharing my manuscript to the team leader, and it would be composed, and hope it will be circulated to all the participants. The publications which I have listed could not be composed, but I am sending, and that will be made available to all the participants at some point of time before your course come to end. So that's why the knowledge of scripts that prevailed in the ancient world is very important. And as you know, there are 4 stages where they have tried to notice. One is pictography or picture writing, ideographic writing, phonetic, and alphabetic. So what at present we have alphabetic system. So it has undergone many changes over the millennium, over the centuries. So what at present we have is pictography. And when we refer to the Indus script, we call it proto-historic writing. And it's very essential and subsequently to know the antiquity of writing in India. And that is also equally essential, because for us the benchmark is the Indus seals, the writing. Even now there are efforts by various scholars to decipher it, but unanimously it has not been accepted, and still progress is on. And now for young scholars, participants like you, I wish you should also take initiative, some interest to understand what is written on the in the seals. So this is one area which is very, very essential, and young scholars should get into this and try to know, and it's very important. So the Indus civilization, which made a beginning in 2500 BC, we have a large number of seals that has come down to us. That is, and there is a huge gap up to from 2500 BC it was there, and the later period it continued up to 1750 BC, and after that there is a huge gap, there is a vacuum, and till 3rd century BC, or even slightly earlier, because of some archaeological evidences and others, they have taken the antiquity of writing to little earlier phase. So there is a huge gap. Where did they exist? What system of writing existed? And that is a very important question comes to us. Before the Brahmi, or what are the different stages Brahmi has undergone? Because a set of edicts, when we examine Ashokan rock edicts or contemporary other, those few inscriptions which are placed in the 3rd century BC, they are all early Brahmi, and we have received the entire thing in a most evolved form. If at all, what were the earlier stages in its evolution? So the origin of Brahmi script is still debated and discussed, and no further conclusions have come, because we have got it in a most evolved form, either in the Ashokan rock edicts or in the 3rd century BC, whatever other few inscriptions that has been reported from Indian subcontinent. It's very important. And other than the archaeological sources, to prove that there existed a system of writing, we have Buddhist literature, Jains and Brahminical literature, even the Vedas. They say that the system of writing existed. Unfortunately, during the Vedic phase, the powerful oral tradition was there, and it was transferred to successive generations, and it was not committed to writing. Or at some point of time, they would have written mostly on the perishable material like birch leaf or palm leaf, and over the period of time, we have lost it. So there did exist system of writing even before that. Because of they recorded on a perishable material, it didn't survive to us. And it is only Ashoka, who was influenced by Darius and others, got his edicts written throughout Indian subcontinent and the neighboring countries also, his edicts. So that he, in a way, started the tradition. Of course, we have other contemporary records also. He popularized engraving on stones and boulders, pillars, and even we have inscriptions that are recorded in caves. Epigraphy is a Greek word to engrave upon. Epi means on, and graphy means to engrave upon. It is a compound word, a Greek word, that is epigraphy. And India is very rich as far as epigraphical wealth is concerned. Throughout the Indian subcontinent, hundreds and thousands of inscriptions have been found, and even now there are explorations going on and epigraphical explorations, and they are discovering many more new inscriptions are coming to light. So India is singularly rich in epigraphs, both lithic, that is on stone, and on copper plate. Many inscriptions have come to light. So anything which exists when we engrave on a hard material, it can be considered an epigraph or inscription. But later, in an extended sense, we have painted inscriptions also. In Ajanta, for example, there are painted inscriptions. So though it is a painting, we consider it as an inscription. So strictly speaking, it should be on a hard material. So in extended sense, even we can take the painted inscriptions also, painted also as epigraphs or inscriptions. So thousands and thousands of inscriptions have come to light, right from 3rd century BC to the medieval and late medieval period. Hundreds and thousands of inscriptions have come to light. And as you are all being introduced, the level 1, the Brahmi script and its evolution. And another very major script that existed is Kharoshthi script, that also being taught to you. So these were the two major scripts, and Brahmi has a long history from its origin to the development. Brahmi and its derivatives, right from 3rd century BC or even slightly earlier to the up to 12th century. All its derivatives, we see it has a long history of more than 1,500 years. And Kharoshthi is a script which we find not only in Ashokan rock edicts and many other records reported from North India. So we don't see much of evolutionary trend in that. When you see 400 from 3rd century BC, it continued up to 2nd or 3rd century Common Era. We don't see much of evolution. It has one basic form. Adding a stroke, we get the vowel signs and all. So there are very few scholars. I'm extremely happy in this level on epigraphy and paligraphy. Even you have been taught Kharoshthi script also. That's very, very essential, because most of the people or the students and scholars, they are focusing Brahmian derivatives, and they are less introduced, or they are not giving much attention to learn the Kharoshthi script. It's very essential. I appreciate in this, when I saw the module, the teaching, you have been taught Kharoshthi inscriptions and the calligraphy of Kharoshthi script also. That's very essential. So when we look into the epigraphical, the studies, its development, the year 1784 forms to be a very, very important, crucial to understand the epigraphical studies and paligraphical studies in Indian context. That is, the establishment of the Asiatic Society of Bengal in the year 1764 is very, very important. So that was the beginning, and they tried to make an extensive survey. It gave momentum to the study of Indological studies, not only inscriptions, and many related history and Indological studies as such found a momentum when they found the Society of Asiatic Society of Bengal, Calcutta. It's very important. And then, the next stage is widespread efforts, to copy inscriptions that are found in the entire Indian subcontinent. That was the last half of the 18th century, all were making efforts to extensively go again and copy most of the inscriptions that were reported and that went on. So that forms the second stage in the epigraphicals. First, the establishment of the Asiatic Society of Bengal in the year 1784, and the next phase is copying inscriptions. I would like to say, in a greater Indian context, those inscriptions that were reported from Ceylon, adjoining countries also. Now we should take India in the greater Indian context, which included the SAARC countries also. So they found a lot of epigraphs, and you might know, along with our script language, even Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, I have included in my publication list, some of them which I am going to narrate you in the course of my talk. So efforts were on there to copy inscriptions from all over India, which came in thousands and thousands. And the next is the preparation of the calligraphical charts that we are going to focus now. Buehler and many other subsequent scholars, they prepared charts, and with the help of calligraphical charts, we are able to make out and made extensive study. So this is one important 3 stages which made a beginning in the year 1784 to the further. It's very important movement what we see in copying inscriptions. And as I told, early, most of the inscriptions found are in Brahmi and Prakrit language, and subsequently we find the end of the 1st century BC and the beginning, we find the Sanskrit language also got it slowly prominent, and the Gupta and post-Gupta period, Sanskrit became a very, very important, prominent language, and it continued for many, many centuries, even the medieval, late medieval, and subsequent period also, we find large number of Sanskrit inscriptions. So we should say Brahmi as a pan-Indian script with its evolved derivatives, and Sanskrit as a pan-Indian language. Sanskrit we find throughout, whether it is Northeast or Kashmir or down to Kanyakumari, entire Indian subcontinent, we find large number of Sanskrit inscriptions. Though from 5th to 6th century onwards, regional languages no doubt made a foray, and they were the royal languages, but along with the regional language, in the south especially when it comes to Tamil, Kannada or Telugu, along with the regional languages, Sanskrit too continued as a epigraphical language. Many copper plates, stone inscriptions we find along with the regional language. Sanskrit also played a very important role. That's why we have many hundreds and thousands of inscriptions that are recorded in Sanskrit language. So you may ask, when we take up epigraphical explorations, we will go into some of the publications especially, and refer the topographical list. Now you may, for example, you may come across a new inscription and you want to know whether it is already published, already noticed, that you have to refer to certain epigraphical publications. Then only you will come to know whether it is already noticed or totally a new inscription. Because earlier scholars, most of them, they have done extensive survey, epigraphical explorations, and they have recorded, noticed in different epigraphical publications that I am going to take up shortly. So you have to know. In fact, when I joined the epigraphy branch of the Archaeological Survey of India, there were many technical officers. For nearly 6 months to 1 year, we were asked to read publications. And then only after a couple of years, we were sent on epigraphical tours to copy inscriptions. So initial period, we were introduced to many of the books which are focused on the earlier surveys conducted by different scholars, and this is very important. So normally, basically we see the stone inscriptions, that is lithic records and copper plates we find in hundreds and thousands. I did not reiterate here, epigraphy forms the basic or the primary source to reconstruct our ancient Indian history, especially early history. Of course, its importance is also continued when we take up the medieval and late medieval period also. Epigraphy forms, the inscription forms the basic source. In fact, if what history we have, it's all mainly based on the epigraphs. Unfortunately, the due place what it deserved, it has not gone in the recent years because lack of focus, and many young scholars are not trained in the area, especially decipherment. I wish to say the students, they focus on the secondary sources and seldom they make efforts to go into the original source, either to see the original inscription in situ or wherever available. For example, we have more than nearly a lakh of stamp pages that are stored in the epigraphy branch of the Mysore Archaeological Survey of India. So we these days depend on the secondary sources. So there should be some effort to review, revise, and look into the earlier, the in situ, the stamp pages and the transcripts prepared and preserved in the epigraphy branch, the Mysore. So students should go, for real research students, they should not only depend on the secondary sources, but should look into the primary, the original stamp pages that are available in the Mysore office. If they have to review and understand either the paleographical aspects of the stone inscription or the contents of what is recorded. As I told, we used to take up epigraphical survey, and the most suitable time we used to take up our journeys, it is starting from August to February. This is the most ideal season to conduct field work, because you can't take up field work in extreme summer season or rainy season. It should be a favorable time for us to conduct epigraphical survey. That used to be mostly starting from August to February. We used to take up epigraphical survey, and it used to be a village to village survey. We used to take up each tehsil, go in different directions and make extensive survey and copy those inscriptions reported. Sometime, it depends. Some of the color we get, how you may ask, how do you locate, try to find out a place which is rich in epigraphs. As you know, most of the temples, already well known, they are reported, they are studied. There are many temples lying many parts of India. There are some inscriptions recorded, so that we used to copy. and some stray inscriptions in the most of the villages that also used to copy. And after copying those inscriptions, we used to report that in annual report on Indian epigraphy. So for me, when I joined the epigraphy branch, I thought it just an extension of my postgraduate study, what I did of ancient history and archaeology. And here it is a pure academic organization where all scholars were seriously engaged in the decipherment, transcribing them, noticing them, editing them in different activities. It was totally agog with all academic activities, and very great scholars used to visit epigraph branch to refer to the original source. Even now it is a rich repository of stamp pages. As I told, a serious scholar, student of epigraphy as well as calligraphy should visit Mysore office, and it has a very rich collection of books, library books, and they need to consult to know it. More than a century old books are collected and preserved in epigraphy branch. So this is the very important aspect I'm going to deal with. So when it comes to the publication, I have made in 8 separate groups or categories. Epigraphical publications, that is the publications brought out by the Archaeological Survey of India publication, that is the first. And the second category which I have listed is on Indian calligraphy. What are the basic work which you have to consult, and subsequently other books on calligraphy also have listed. That's very important. This is the second. And on Indian epigraphy, what are the basic books or general books which you have to refer, and books based on dynasties and regions. This is on again on epigraphs, Indian epigraphy, and epigraphical publications brought out by the different state archaeology department and other agencies. So this forms the fourth category of the epigraphical publication. And I have to mention here the Indian Council of Historical Research, ICHR, dynasty-wise. They have brought out many volumes so far. That is a very important contribution from them. Earlier, the epigraphy branch, the Archaeological Survey of India, they have brought Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. Except few volumes, they are all based on dynasties. And the same thread, in continuation of that, in subsequent period, the ICHR brought out many publications from North Indian dynasties and those from South. And there are still many scholars are there, they are contributing the corpus that is brought out by the Indian Historical Research Society, ICHR. And the epigraphical publications of inscriptions found in neighboring countries and Southeast Asia countries. So this is another category I have tried to make. And the seventh category I have made indexes. This is very important. Student of epigraphy and calligraphy should know what are the indexes available. Suppose they want to write, at least many of you may not be knowing, there is Bhandarkar list of Bhandarkar's list, very unique, though it was written much a century before. It's very important. It forms an appendix of Epigraphy Indica. Even now, the way he has prepared beautifully, and suppose you want to know date-wise, village-wise, district, king, dynasty. So indexes are very important. to approach a subject, to write an article or your dissertation or for your thesis, you have to consult basically some indexes, which is very important. It is almost a supplement or an appendix to a Epigraphia Indica that I have also listed here. That's very essential indexes, how to approach a field. And then Journal of Epigraphical Society of India. There are many journals are there. You find a lot of articles written on epigraphs and copper plates and all. But we have a dedicated society, Epigraphical Society of India. Last year also, it has nearly the year 1976, the society was established, and regularly they have been conducting the annual conferences jointly with the Place Name Society of India, and regularly they are bringing the journals also. So last year we had at Dharmasthala, this year we have to decide. So this is a dedicated journal where you find exclusively articles based only on inscriptions. And here at this moment, we need to strengthen the society. Many of the youngsters who are here and others, they can also become members of this Epigraphical Society of India, so that you have a forum to present your paper, your new discovery, your own ideas, views at the forum, and get the same thing published also. Thereby you are strengthening the Epigraphical Society of India. So I request many of the participants also, I will pass it on the details to the team leaders at some point of time. You can consult and become members, and so that annually you can take part and interact with many of the scholars in the area of epigraphy who come from different parts of India. So these 8 categories I have made the publications. So I'm going to take up with the ASI, the Department of Archaeological Survey of India report, annual report on Indian epigraphy. So this is the first source. As I told, after our epigraphical survey, copying of inscription, we report each year from where we copied, which state we visited, and it contains a brief. So it is right from the year the department was established, from the year 1887 onwards, we have this annual report on Indian epigraphy. Earlier it was annual report on epigraphy, and subsequently in the year 1945, large number of inscriptions that were reported from North India also were slowly included, and it is called Annual Report on Indian Epigraphy. It has 4 indexes. The first A deals with the copper plates that were noticed from different parts of India. And then Appendix B contains stone inscriptions. It contains fine spot of the inscription, language and script, date, and the remarks. So, and sometime where it is published. So you get to know, you have to refer to the annual report on Indian epigraphy, and there are indexes given also in the beginning to know what are all inscriptions reported from different parts of India. That's very important. Of course, Appendix C and D. D, of course, includes Arabic and Persian inscription. As I told, we have 2 different branches. One for Sanskrit and Dravidian inscriptions located in Mysore, with its zonal offices at present at Lucknow and Chennai. And we specialize in inscriptions. There are 2 sections. One is Dravidian section and another is North Indian section. Dravidian section the assistants and officers, they deal with all the inscriptions from Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, and Telugu. And Sanskrit inscriptions, of course, which includes reported from largely from North India, and sometime most of them, sometime from South also. So we have a Sanskrit section, and through, I was in the Sanskrit section. So I copied extensively. I traveled most of the parts of India. As they mentioned, had a very rich experience in taking part in the Ayodhya also for nearly 6 months in the year 2003, though much of epigraphical material couldn't come, but it was a very rich experience for me to be part of the Ayodhya excavation. And I was in 3, 4 other major excavations. I stayed there in situ and examined those inscriptions. So I had occasions to travel even northeast, also many of the states, and copy, and had a very rich experience. So the annual report on Indian epigraphy, I told each scholar, and they are available in the publication section. Mysore also has a publication section. Headquarters has. You can try to acquire them and have possess some of these books for your. Suppose you want to know from Maharashtra, particular, what are the inscriptions already reported. There are so many inscriptions from Kanheri, Nasik, and just for example, you want to know how many inscriptions already reported in the annual report on Indian epigraphy. So you can consult our annual report for this. And then second comes the Epigraphia Indica. This is a very, very prestigious volume and highly critically edited volumes. It runs to 45 volumes, 44 volumes now. And each one you can find, it's a very important epigraphical publication, Epigraphia Indica. Again, these are available. Some may be out of print, but if you want to acquire, please look into these to how critically each inscriptions are edited. You can try to know this Epigraphia Indica. Whatever briefly noticed in the annual report, when the scholar finds it's a new inscription altogether, maybe a new Gupta inscription or inscription with lot of historical value, cultural significance, social, economic significance. So they could take up such very important, it may be throwing light on the new regnal of a particular king. So such inscriptions, or calligraphically very interesting inscription, epigraphically very important inscription. So such are critically edited in Epigraphia Indica. Earlier scholars have started from Pulsh, the government epigraphist, and subsequently many scholars who were the government epigraphist earlier and subsequently became chief epigraphist, they edited these Epigraphia Indica volumes. And another very important publication is the Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum, popularly known as CII, Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. This is a Greek, again, a word. So, again, this 7 volumes have come so far. And the first volume is purely on the Ashokan rock edicts. And second volume is on the first volume, of course, edited by Alexander Cunningham in the year 1877 of inscriptions of Ashoka. Again, Hulsh in the year 1925 brought out, say, volume 1 as one volume. Again, it is on Ashokan rock edicts. Whatever available at that point of time, subsequently, many more Ashokan rock edicts have come and they were edited in the different Epigraphia Indica volumes. So these were done earlier by the scholars. And Corpus CI Volume 2, Sten Kano, he has written on Kharosthi inscriptions. It's a huge volume with a lot of introduction and including most of the Kharosthi inscriptions that were available at that point of time. He has included and critically edited. And students who are learning now Kharosthi, I request you to consult this book on Sten Kano written by Kharosthi inscription. They are available also when you approach the publication division. You will get that. And the volume 2, part 2, deals with the Barhut inscription. This is very important. All belong to Shungan phase. In fact, I used to recommend this book, particularly those students who are practicing Brahmi. It's a very small label inscription, very simple inscription. One can try to read from the facsimile, beautiful inscriptions. So for the beginners who want to learn Brahmi, of course, Ashokan or big rock edicts are there. For small inscription, which has some eye copy also of the inscription, this Barhut inscription will be extremely useful. A good number of photographs are there, facsimiles are there, text is given, introductions are given. So this is volume 2 of Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. It's a very, very important publication. Then comes the South Indian inscriptions. Of course, again, to revert back to the corpus, rest are all based on the dynasties, like Imperial Guptas, Vakatakas, Kalachuris, like that, and Chandelas and Paramaras. So totally there are 7 volumes are available. Further, it could not be edited because we lack a person of that stature who could take critically editing such inscriptions and bring out volume. And I told this is a continuity what you see in ICHR publication. They are also taken up dynasty wise, the corpus of inscriptions. South Indian inscription is very important. All inscriptions noticed from South India, which are basically again noticed in the annual report. And further, there they have given the text with a general introduction about the inscription and the object of the inscription, the date, and the text. Basically, in the South Indian inscription, the text is available. That is one, you yourself can read the text and some photographs at the end appended. So South Indian inscription forms very, very important. Now there is an initiative to go ahead with the North Indian inscription on the same pattern. So some scholars have been assigned to take up and they are doing work on the North Indian inscriptions also. And there are very few volumes who are totally dedicated. For example, Srirangam temple has a large number of inscriptions all around, and there is an exclusive volume, South Indian inscription volume, only on Srirangam temple itself, because such is the vastness. Even Tanjavur temple, they have been brought out in volumes. So you can access this South Indian inscription with a very good introduction. Each volume, they are also again available with the publication division of the epigraphy branch. You can acquire some of the volumes where you are interested in this. And the topographical list. This they have tried to bring out separately. One is topographical list for South India, which includes all the 4 states, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh. So there is a topo list in 2-3 volume years it has come. So you can refer, if you know particular state, the district. Suppose you come to know about some village, you want to know whether that particular inscription already noticed or copied, or you have curiosity to know whether some inscriptions are reported from that village. So you can refer the topographical list. Again, this is available in the epigraphy branch, a topographical list of South India, which has come in separate volumes for the earlier years. And again, for topographical list of Northern India, from 1945 onwards till late part of the 90s, they have brought out another small book. So you get to know almost all it contains the village name, tehsil, and the district and the state. So if you want to know what are the inscriptions that are reported to Maharashtra, you can know through this topographical list. It's very essential. There they would have given the annual report number, the year in which the particular number is noticed, the village from the inscription notice is given in the topo list. Subsequently, you can consult the annual report of that particular year, whether it be 26 or 24, whatever the number is given, and that particular year annual report you have to consult to know more details about the inscription, about the date, about the object, about the king, dynasty, so many things all are given in the annual report. So this topo list of Northern India is equally important, which covers whatever covered by the epigraphy branch of the Archaeological Survey of India. And there is one subject index also. That's some years they have brought out subject Indian. It's about, the Nishka is a term, coin. And when it has occurred in epigraphs also, you will come to know the subject index, some tax terms, some territorial divisions, some administrative unit. So such terms, subject index is there. Such terms, Kanya Shulka, or any term, for example, some terms which has occurred in the inscription, especially this will be very, very useful for you to write an article based on the particular subject. You can look. They are available in the subject index. Is again another small publication from the epigraphy branch. And other than that, we have Indian Archaeology Review, or DG Review we say. There are many sections. Each year it is brought out. There will be a particular section on epigraphy, both Sanskrit and Dravidian and Arabic Persian. What are the significant inscriptions that are copied in a particular year are brought out in the Indian Archaeology Review. DG Review is brought out regularly every year. So you can get to know this. So these are some 8 publications from the Archaeological Survey of India, epigraphy branch in collaboration, they have brought out. Each year now, regularly, they have been bringing the annual reports also. So these forms very, very important source. When you consult annual report, with that number, you can access the stamp pages of the inscription and the transcript that are prepared. That's again, they are available in the epigraphy branch. You can see if you want to consult some stamp page from Nasik, some inscription copied or reported. If you give that particular number, they will make available you the transcripts as well as the stamp pages of particular inscription. So you yourself can, suppose you are unable to visit this site, you can get to know from the original stamp pages of the inscription. And other than that, there are some monographs are brought out by the Archaeological Survey of India. Karandai plates, one such, there are many memoirs of Archaeological Survey of India. Karandai plates of Rajendra Chola, it's one of the huge set of copper plate containing about 64 plates. And recently they have come across Indalur copper plate, which is much more, which comprises more than 90 and above copper plate, a very huge set. So earlier, This Karandai plates have been edited by K.G. Krishnan. So this is one of the important monographs. Like that, there are many. Ancient India, also we have a journal brought out by the Archaeological Survey of India. There are some sections on epigraphy and calligraphy also that you can see. Now coming to the calligraphy, there are some basic books, and I told in the beginning of my talk, antiquity of writing is very, very important, especially as students of calligraphy. One should try to refer a book written by David Deranger. Two books are written by him. One is the Alphabet, brought out in the year 1953, and subsequently he wrote a small version, a truncated version of the same book, Writing. So these are two books. At least I think all these students should refer writing to know about the cuneiform system of writing, hieroglyphy, and the Chinese system of writing. And there is a section also on the Indus seals. So you get to know what are all the ancient scripts that prevail and the art of writing. So he has beautifully narrated. I think once all of you should try to read the books written by David Deranger. And among the basic books or general books in calligraphy, all of you must be consulting and going to consult the Ojha Bharatiya Prachina Lipimala. This, I should say, very, very important. Though a century-old book, even now we often consult this book, either to know the origin of Brahmi and its derivatives, the Siddhamatrika character, many things. It has wonderful eye copy. So brought out by, edited by, or written by Ojha, Gauri Shankar Ojha, Bharatiya Prachina Lipimala, originally written in 1918 and reprinted in the year 1971. And another book is Shivaramurthy C, Indian Epigraphy and South Indian Script. This equally important book. Now, though he says South Indian script, the charts he has prepared, he has included dynasty-wise different forms of the Brahmi and its evolution in North Indian context also. The book written by Sivaram Murthy is extremely useful. So these two books are extremely important for the students of calligraphy. And Ahmad Hassan Dani, this is, I should say, is a Bible. It's a very, very important book for all the students of Indian calligraphy. From the introduction till the end, he has covered many important the growth development of the scripts, including Kharoshthi, many things. Ahmad Hassan Dani, the book on Indian calligraphy is very important. And for most of you may not be available, the first book written by Buehler, it is in German, French, I think, Indische Calligraphy. It was written near 19, reprinted, of course, subsequently. It's a very old book, at least for seeing, you can see the chart if it's available in some library. I don't think it is. So, Buehler. So, these are the basic books to be referred by the students of Indian calligraphy. Very essential, especially I would, even now I reread a book written by Ahmad Hassan Dani, beautifully written book. And some of the books connected with the Brahmi script, C.S. Upasak, he wrote the history and calligraphy of Mauryan Brahmi script. It's very important. You may note down, no, now all of you are in the level 1. It may need, but in course of time, when you progress further in your study, you may try to slowly understand this. Upasak has tried to make out all the different forms that are occurring in different rock edicts throughout the whatever found in the Indian subcontinent. Suppose Ma, for example, different varieties has tried to make Sa different letters. How are the different forms? And each letter he has tried to define. So that is one a very important book. And Gupta, SP and K.S. Ramchandran, The Origin of Brahmi Script is written in the year 1979. Again, Rastogi, another great scholar, he has written Origin of Brahmi Script. So this, tomorrow I'm sending it. It will be made available by the coordinators so that you can have a list with you. At leisurely, you can either consult. I have taken most of the book from the Richard Solomon book. It's a very exhaustive bibliography has tried to given with regard to epigraphy and calligraphy. I have selected few for you in this. Again, for Kharoshthi, Das Gupta has written a book on the development of Kharoshthi script and S.J. Mangalam on the Kharoshthi script. So these are some books connected with the this one, and some more books are there by the earlier calligraphers like Bernal A.C., Elements of South Indian Calligraphy, and T.V. Mahalingam has written Early South Indian Calligraphy. Banerjee, The Origin of Bengali Script. So when compared to epigraphy, calligraphy, again another area where young scholars have to read. These were written many years before, and after that, large number of inscriptions have come to light. So better to restudy them and enrich the area of calligraphy again by taking such at least Proto-Bengali and some areas where you find where books are not written, you can try to focus and take this study further. And coming to Indian epigraphy, I have few books, general basic books I'm going to suggest. Sarkar, D.C. Sarkar, Indian epigraphy. This is a very basic book. All have to read. This is a very essential book on Indian epigraphy. I should say it's a Bible for the students. Again, there is no aspect which has not tried to cover territorial, right from different inscriptions, administrative terms, so many things has covered. It's a very useful book. Again, another book by Richard Solomon, because after many years, in the early part of 90s, 1990, and he wrote, and he has improved. He has more scientifically has written, and containing a very exhaustive bibliography of all the books connected with epigraphy and calligraphy is there you find in the end. It's a very beautiful book written by Richard Solomon. Again, another book is by Dr. K.V. Ramesh, Indian Epigraphy, brought out in the year 1984. You can also try to read. And a small book by Dr. J.S. Guy, Introduction to Indian Epigraphy, brought out by the Central Institute of Indian Languages in the year 1986. So these are some of the basic books. All should try to read at least D.C. Sarkar book. I request all the participants to reread again, and possibly possess a copy with you, not merely going to library. Each and every one should have the book written by D.C. Sarkar to read it again and again. And there are some books, as I told you, epigraphy is a very vast, rich area. So region-wise, script-wise, language, D.C. Sarkar has written Select Inscriptions, again, volume 1 and 2, which includes Ashokan rock edicts and subsequently other important inscriptions which includes some foreign countries also. He has brought the first volume contains from 3rd century BC to the 6th century Common Era, that is one volume. Again, from 6th or 7th to the 10th, 12th century, another one. So he has gone region-wise, which of course covers very, very important dynasties. And it's, again, the select inscriptions, which includes Prakrit and Sanskrit inscriptions, very important. You can refer this. Whenever you get any important, all such important inscriptions are reported with a brief. All the earlier publications brought out, it contains the text. For example, the Prakrit text, not only Ashokan, even other Prakrit inscription, he has Sanskrit text. You get both the version, first Prakrit and subsequently the Sanskrit version of the same inscription also you find. So select inscriptions in 2 volumes by D.C. Sarkar is very important. And when it comes to the Rajasthan, I am speaking of the earlier scholar, Colonel James Todd has written Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan. It was based on most of the earlier inscription. It's a very interesting book. Those who want to acquaint themselves with the Rajasthan and the adjacent area, you have to read this book. And Phogat, he has written Inscriptions of Haryana, a small book. It contains all the books. And Chaudhary R.K. Select Inscriptions of Bihar. Again, it contains a list of inscriptions. And N.G. Majumdar has written Inscriptions of Bengal. Whatever at that point of time available, they have tried to bring. And Yanar Mathura inscription. You know, Mathura has a huge collections of epigraphs now in the museum also. One scholar, Yanarit, he has tried to compile and bring it in the form of a book that is from Mathura. And when you come to the northeastern states, very, very important books are there. They have to be read. Most of them, they are not approached, they are seen. Gauda Lekhamala, you know, Gauda country, that Bengal and the adjacent area, it contains a corpus, a good number of inscriptions. It is called Gauda Lekhamala. It was written long back in the year 1914, a book. And Kamarupa Shasanavali, you know, Kamarupa is the present Assam and other adjacent area. Again, it's a huge corpus. Those of you who have visited the State Archaeology Museum, Guwahati, you see large number of stone inscriptions and copper plates are preserved. And they have made a catalog also. And other than the museum, whatever all the inscriptions found in Kamakhya and many other temples around in Guwahati and the adjacent region, they have brought it in the Gauda Lekhamala. And Kamarupa Shasanavali, Kamarup, as you know, it's again Assam. And once those who want to look into the inscription from Orissa, this Rajaguru has written in volume 6 volumes. He has brought out book on Orissan inscription. Again, for Delhi Sultanate, we have a book on by Pushpa Prasad. She has written a book on Delhi Sanskrit inscriptions from Delhi Sultanate. And many of you want to know the inscriptions that are reported from Kashmir, Himachal, and adjacent areas. There are a book by Sharda Inscriptions of Kashmir by Kaul Diyambi, a very great scholar who initially brought a corpus of the inscriptions from and subsequently brought a revised version where he has extensively dealt with the calligraphical aspects of Sharda inscription, Takari and Devashesha. These are its subsidiary forms of Sharda script. And Even West Bengal, there are books are there. And the mention I should make of the epigraphical records that are from Manipur. Even Manipur has a large number of collection stone inscriptions are there. And some earlier scholars they have brought a book, Epigraphical Records of Manipur. It's very important. Even subsequently, we copied many inscriptions, but unfortunately now we don't have a resource person who can decipher early Manipuri. Most of the scholars, they know the modern Manipuri and its script, but those inscriptions which were written, engraved some 300 years before, we don't know, the resource persons are not there to decipher such early inscriptions. And as far as Himachal Pradesh, the very, very useful book is written by Professor Chabra, Antiquities of Chamba State. It is in two parts. One volume contains about the stone inscriptions from different parts of Chamba. It was Chamba State earlier, princely state. And Chamba also has a very good museum, Buri Singh Museum, where they have preserved most of the stone inscriptions and copper plates. So part 2 deals with the copper plates. So these are very important inscriptions. And again, there are scholars who have written on the Andhra Pradesh, Ramarao inscriptions of Andhra Pradesh. And I should mention, when it comes to numismatic, numerals, the great contribution from Shobhana Gokhale. She has written on Indian numerals. She was earlier a great professor of Deccan College, Pune. She has written about the Kanheri inscriptions, and her contribution is immense as far as the inscriptions that are found in the Western caves. She has worked on that, and her basic work on Indian numerals even now stands. The very, very being from Nasik and Pune, I think everyone should feel proud her contribution in this area of numerals. Now, I should refer in brief about the books. I told when you see in a greater Indian context, there are many. It's all the Brahmian derivatives when you look into some of the scripts there. So earlier we have books, Epigraphia Burmica, Mayamis, that is from Burma. We have few volumes. Those inscriptions that are reported from Burma, we have Epigraphia Burmanica, Epigraphia Zeylanica, that is from Ceylon. Ceylon, what are Sri Lanka? Earlier it is called Ceylon, Epigraphia Zeylanica, and some French scholars have worked on inscription to Cambodia, seeds, and they have written 8 volumes, mostly the inscriptions that are reported from Cambodia. I told Thailand, Cambodia, Champa, this large number of inscriptions are there. In 5th to 6th century, along with our tradition, culture, even the script, language, beautiful Sanskrit inscriptions are there, which are very close to our Pallava Grantha, and in all probability, from our south, the script has traveled far east, and that's why we found in Southeast Asia a huge number of inscriptions. And again from Nepal ka Prachin Abhilekh, Joshi Hariram, he has written, and the inscription from Burma and ancient Nepal. And DC Sarkar again has written epigraphical discoveries in East Pakistan, the present Dhaka or Bangladesh. Some inscriptions are found there, and earlier DC Sarkar has written a book on East Pakistan. So other than this, there is state archaeology department. I told, they have contributed a lot. And Mysore, the state archaeology department, they have brought in several series, Epigraphia Karnataka, earlier by Dr. D.L. Rice, a great explorer. He had copied number of inscriptions from different districts of Karnataka. That too, he went on horseback where lesser communication was available. He traveled extensively different parts of Karnataka. That's why they could bring out Epigraphia Karnataka, running to several volumes, 17 volumes. And subsequently, the University of Mysore, they have brought out a new series of Epigraphia Karnataka. So this covers inscriptions that are reported from different districts of Karnataka. Similarly, the Travancore Archaeological Series from Kerala, a few volumes are available. It contains a larger number of inscriptions that are reported, mostly, of course, written in Malayalam, and some good number of Sanskrit inscriptions. But few volumes are available. They are earlier edited by Gopinath Rao and other great scholars. Similarly, from Andhra Pradesh, we have district-wise, they have brought many books on inscriptions. And similarly of Tamil Nadu, each district-wise you have the State Directorate of Archaeology of Tamil Nadu. They have brought out inscriptions pertaining to different districts. They have brought in different series, Nellore, Kadapa, and many this one. And as I mentioned, ICHR needs a special mention as far the epigraphy contributions are concerned. So they brought out dynasty-wise. So Kadambas edited by Dr. G.S. Gai, Pallavas by T.V. Mahalingam, Western Ghats by Dr. K.V. Ramesh, Chalukyas and there by Professor Padigar. So only to name a few. So they have brought out in dynasty-wise different inscription, and still they are continuing. Many eminent scholars, epigraphists, they have contributed for ICHR, Indian Council of Historical Research. They are bringing it in the form of a corpus. Dynasty-wise, they are taking. So what earlier CI volume, Corpus Inscription Indicarum, brought out by the Archaeological Survey of India, I should say, now further continued by the ICHR by their publication. Now, lastly, I should mention about the index. This I told, index forms are very important. They are available in the form of a supplement or appendix. Keel Horn, he brought a list of inscriptions from northern India, beginning from 400 Common Era to subsequent period. It appears as a supplement in Epigraphia Indica, volume 5 and 8. So these were the earliest approach when very few inscriptions are available, but even then they have done a very good work. It is done by Keel Horn. Suppose you want to refer, please refer to this index to write your article, your thesis, and any other. Again, Keel Horn wrote on South Indian inscriptions, list of inscriptions from South India beginning from 500 AD. So he has included some available inscription at that point of time. So these are the two lists appears as appendix in volume 5 to 8 of Epigraphia Indica. And another very important list is Luder's list. Luder's, a very important work, especially excluding the Ashokan, all the earlier Prakat inscriptions, which are reported in the different places, right, maybe in the western caves and many parts of India. So this Luder's list is very important. List of Brahmi inscriptions from the earliest times to 4th century Common Era. So this is very important. He has given the fine spot, especially to the personal names the regional, the geographical names, very important work. So it will help you to a great extent to at least the Prakrit phase of the earlier India. What are the different place names, personal names, and the professions pursued by different persons, and they are known from the epigraphs. So this is going to be very valuable work. Luder's list is very important. Again, Hiralal, he wrote those inscriptions from central provinces and Berar. This is a much earlier work brought out in the year 1932, but it contains a sort of index. Central India, it was called, pre-partition period. It included many earlier inscriptions, and it's a very useful work by Hiralal. And the most important is Bhandarkar, D.R. Bhandarkar, a list of inscriptions from northern India. It's very important. So even now, we consult these books for any sort of reference. So D.R. Bhandarkar's list, we say, and it appears as an appendix to volume 19 to 23. It comes along with the volume, Epigraphy Indica. So it's a very important work. Even sometime, I was associated to revise. Unfortunately, we want to update that work. Bhandarkar list, it didn't materialize much. But now, again, some of the students who are here in this, or they can try to revise, because large number of inscriptions are noted, have come to light in the recent years. So this earlier work done by great scholars like D.R. Bhandarkar, of course, it needs to be revised. And Indian antiquary, again, all of you might have heard, is a very important. Again, it has an index, and the earlier volumes of Indian antiquary has got many inscriptions listed. And D.C. Sarkar's Indian Epigraphical Glossary. This is also a very important book. I think each one of you should possess. It contains different terms, technical terms, administrative terms, geography, many such glossary. It should be, you should have as it as a reference to consult as and when you have some doubts. And the last work which I have to mention is the Journal of Epigraphical Society of India. It's a very dedicated focus journal brought out regularly, which includes almost all the latest discoveries, epigraphical discoveries, and this is there. And I told in the beginning, anybody can enroll in this society and become a life member or member. So so with this, I have tried to give a broad introduction to the epigraphy and paleographical studies and various publications connected with paleography and epigraphy. So with this, I hope I have tried to introduce the new participants, especially, of course, we have been all last few days, we have been into this, and I could give very broad, giving a personal touch, what I had a long sojourn in epigraphy branch, and the publications, because many of you don't know how to approach the subject, and especially index are very, very useful to write an article, and many doesn't know. So with this, I thought this is a new theme also today I had to speak about the ASI publication, not only, and other related books connected with epigraphy and paleography. Thank you very much.